Why does Doflamingo wear glasses? Does he have sensitive eyes? Maybe a bold fashion statement? Or is there some other meaning behind them that connect to his complex character on a much deeper level than you might have originally thought? In this video, we will explore who Doflamingo truly is at heart, what his conflict with Luffy means for the story, and what makes him one of the most iconic antagonists in the entire series. Oh yeah, and before we get into it, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure to hit that big red button below this video. Doflamingo is a special antagonist in the story for a number of reasons. His unusually early introduction to the story, the fantastic and clever ways that he uses his devil fruit, his conqueror's haki, as well as his eccentric appearance are just the tip of the iceberg here. Because I believe that he's actually the most complex villain in the story so far. Doflamingo is a former celestial dragon who has been locked out of paradise. Giving him this sort of backstory was a fantastic move by Oda, as it ties his chaotic and evil nature together with one of the major antagonistic forces of the story. Doflamingo is not just evil for evil's sake. He's the tragic result of the unjust world order created by those around him. His entire childhood, Doflamingo grew up under the ideology that as a world noble, he was practically a god. Having people serve at his will and ruling over them with absolute control and power was not only an idea, but something that constituted everyday life in Marijoa. And yet, when his father decided to leave this world of perverted excess, egotism, and exploitation behind, he was suddenly confronted with the harsh reality of the real world, where there were no more slaves to do the work and satisfy his every desire. In fact, it was the exact opposite. Hated for their heritage, his family was prosecuted by the commoners. Being forced to go into hiding and live off garbage, eventually his mother succumbed to illness. Finally, one day, together with his father Homing and his brother Corazon, he was lynched by an angry mob of commoners that had suffered under the hand of the Tenryobito. This sudden transition from one extreme into the other traumatized and broke the young boy, who until then had known nothing but pleasure and entitlement for his entire life. And interestingly enough, well, this tragic experience brought out the very best in his brother Corazon. It brought out the very worst in himself. A wonderful example of nature versus nurture, I believe. And so, maybe in the end, the decisive factor between the two brothers' contrasting developments was that 𝚱𝚘𝚘𝚒𝚗 was able to show and share his emotions and pain, laughing, crying, and suffering side by side with their parents. Doflamingo, meanwhile, could never really show his true feelings or connect to them on a human level, and thus ended up projecting all of his hate, fear, and pain on his family. Being thrown into misery through the well-meaning but terribly naive decision of his father to try and live a normal life, he felt betrayed, ultimately covering his deep emotional wounds and sudden lack of self-confidence with rage and the sense of importance that he'd been spoon-fed his entire life. Finally, when his traumatizing experience with the villagers was added to this already quite toxic brew of emotions, Doflamingo snapped. And I believe that it was at this point that he truly gave into evil and as a result executed his father. This tragic past results in one of my absolute favorite speeches of the show.
頂点に立つ者が善悪を塗り替える勝者だけが正義だ
As chance would have it, in this moment of deepest darkness, he was discovered by none other than Treble, who instead of showing him care and love, once again hailed him as king and as superior to all others. Filling the hole in his chest with even more ideas of power and greatness, and being handed the tools to act on them, Dofi started to develop into the cruel and manipulative villain that Luffy encounters on Dressrosa. Betrayed from all sides, by his family, by the nobles, and by the people, he had seen just how cruel this world truly was, and realized that it needed to be reborn. In his message, that is, of course. However, his lack of self-confidence and true love would never allow for that. And so, while he loves nothing more than presenting himself as a messenger of chaos and destruction to the world at large.
Chaos is a ladder.
In reality, we find out that he is a total control freak in every sense of the word, desperate to literally try and pull all the strings from behind the scene.
俺が手綱を引いていたんだ。世界の怪物たちの手綱をな。
He needs to be the puppeteer that has full power over whatever is going on in his small world. And this is exactly the reason why betrayal and disloyalty is the worst possible thing for him, as we can see with Corazon and Law. All of this can also be seen really well in the relationship he has with his family. While like a real Don, family seems to be incredibly important to him. His relationship to his crew is quite screwed. There's definitely no doubt that he does seem to care for them to a certain extent, as we can see after Virgo's and Monet's death, or at the lengths that he went to protect Baby 5. However, the things that matter most to him are absolute loyalty and dedication. And so, while it might pain him to sacrifice one of his family members, he will do so to reach his goal. After all, he is a king, a god, who stands above everyone else. His will has priority.
なぜ止める
In many ways, Luffy and Doflamingo are two sides of the same coin. Just like Dofi, Luffy also strongly values the wild patchwork family that he has gathered around him, and those close to him. However, never in his wildest dreams would Luffy put his own ambition over that of his crew, nor sacrifice even a single one of them for any of his goals. Because the Straw Hats, other than the Donquixote pirates, are a crucial part of his ambitions to begin with, and not just pawns to be used. It's one of the major underlying messages of the story. It doesn't really matter what type of values you hold, but just how you act on them in the world.
ディアマンテ、これをお前に任せたい。
Dofi feels like he's entitled to be king and stand above everyone else. He's just taken what is rightfully his through pure strength and power of will. Luffy, meanwhile, also is convinced that he can become Pirate King and takes whatever he wants. And he does so by pure strength and willpower as well. However, where the two of them fundamentally differ from each other is in their incentive. Dofi wants to rule and control others and fill the gaping hole in his heart by seeking the ultimate form of attention. Luffy, on the other hand, simply wants to be free. Doflamingo's nakama serve him, while Luffy's crew are his equals, each with dreams and ambitions of their own. Dofi has subordinates and business partners that want a piece of the cake, while Luffy has friends and allies and people that trust and believe in him and genuinely want him to succeed and be happy. They give Luffy purpose and together guide him towards the right path. Helping and fighting for his friends is what got Luffy this far in the first place. At first, it was Shanks who inspired his dream. Then it was the love and pain that he shared with his brothers that made him fight for his dream in earnest. And finally, it was his crew that helps him do the impossible and defy the world to reach their dreams together. All of them believing in him, but none of them going easy on him. Dofi never had that. Corrupted by the perverse ideology of the nobles and maybe also cursed by his nature, he never had the capability of laughing and crying with his family. As for his executives, they never really gave him anything real to fight and strive for. They just told him that he was entitled to be king and rule over all anyway. And as they like to say, it's very lonely alone at the top. This pattern just keeps going and going the deeper you dig. Dofi despises the Tenryubito and wants to tear down the old world for all the injustice and pain that it has inflicted on him. Luffy also despises the nobles and the world government, however because of what they've done to his friends, not to him. And while Dofi envisions a new world where only the strong will make the cut, ironically enough, he is the one holding the old world together by pulling the strings from the underworld, working with both the world government and the Yonko to secure his position. Only through his defeat by Luffy is the world thrown into real chaos, as Dofi is the very first person not to make the cut for this new world order. This deep irony makes him one of the most tragic characters in the story, I believe. And so this already brings me to the main point of this video that I think many people overlook when it comes to Doflamingo's character. You see, based on all that we've discussed so far, I believe that the biggest irony of the entire Dressrosa arc was the bird cage and all of the other bird symbolism united in a man that Oda literally named Doflamingo. Because he is literally a fragile and exotic bird that is caged himself. Let me explain. In many ways, Doflamingo has always been the puppet of others, never really having any say or control over his own life, his dreams, or his destiny. The true tragedy here, however, was that he never saw the strings himself. He never really heard the commands to follow his purpose, never saw the walls raised around him, isolating him from the world, never felt the push of other people using him for their own interests. But he always followed through on them. The celestial dragons told him to behave like a god. His father made him atone for his own bad conscience and experience hell. Then the world nobles treated him like an outcast, pushing him away. Treble and the other executives told him to behave like a king and strive for power once more. And finally, he was working for the government and Kaido, keeping control over his own small island, where he would be able to tyrannize the people and play God, while working for other people's dreams and ambitions. Not once in his entire life did Dofi have the chance to learn who he truly is and what he truly wants in life, always being a slave to the ideals of others. This is why Luffy will become king of the pirates, and why Dofi never had a chance to play the game in the first place. Because to become Pirate King and truly change the world, you need one thing above all: freedom. And so, once again, it took Luffy to literally break the birdcage that held this rare and exotic flamingo his entire life, by shattering all the expectations and stories about being special that he'd been fed his entire life, and that had dictated his every move. He wanted to be the puppet master, but ended up being the puppet. He was supposed to be a bird that could fly freely, but in the end was locked in a cage for his entire life. And so I think this is why in his battle with Luffy, Dofi is a man with no love, no freedom, and no dream of his own, and as a result has nothing left to lose. And so, by completely destroying him and everything he has worked for, as he so often does, Luffy does not only free Dressrosa, but Doflamingo as well. The moment his cage crumbles and falls, Dofi finally escapes the prison he had built himself unknowingly. And so, while we don't know the original reason that Doflamingo started wearing glasses in the first place, the fact that he was wearing shades his entire life really symbolizes well the shadow under which he had lived since his childhood. And Luffy finally breaking these glasses as he beats Dofi right into the ground finally gives him a glimpse into the light. The only question that remains is whether he will actually notice. I think what Doflamingo's character really is supposed to show us is just how cruel, toxic, and unjust the world is under the rule of the Tenryubito, and how the system that the world government has created produces true despair and evil. And so Doflamingo and the entire Dressrosa arc ultimately present to us the true nature of the world in miniature. In the end, Doflamingo is just another tragic victim of the system, and Luffy is once again the one that works to abolish it. And so I genuinely believe that it's all of these complex layers that are woven into Doflamingo's character that make him one of the most interesting and fascinating villains in anime. There is also another aspect to Doflamingo's character that I found incredibly interesting, that however didn't really fit into the context of this video: the similarities between him and Crocodile. And so I decided to make a small bonus video on the topic that you can watch on the left here. Or if you already want to look to the next villain in the story, you can learn how 𝚱𝚘𝚘𝚔 was able to win his fight against Luffy on the right. Thanks guys, peace.